Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be one that's probably really silly for some of you, and especially for people who actually know how to do blade styles and stuff for Proffie Lightsabers. If you don't know how to do that, go check my video about adding sound fonts to Proffie Lightsabers. I cover how to add blade styles. But I'm going to do it again in this video because it is something that is extremely prevalent in my comment section, in Kyberphonic's comment section, in Case's comment section, in Benji at Nerf Customs comment section, in all font makers comment sections, in their DMs, in their emails, all of that. And one of the most common ones is, hey Kyberphonic, where's the tragedy blade style that you used in your font demo video? I bought the sound font, but the blade style is not working. Now, if you watched my video about adding sound fonts to Proffie Lightsabers, then you should know that there's a difference between a sound font and a blade style. A lot of people cannot get that through their head. There is a difference between a sound font and a blade style. Those are not the same thing. You buy a sound font, you are buying sound files. You buy a blade style, which I don't know if anyone who actually sells blade styles, but if you buy a blade style or download a blade style, you're getting a blade style, not a sound font. There is a difference between the two. The only font maker that I have ever seen that sells the current updated blade styles with their sound fonts is Blue Force Company. Kyberphonic used to do it, but once you get into where there are constant updates to the Proffie OS and all that stuff, it gets really hard to update all that. And people, you can just make your own blade styles, people. It's not that hard. I've already shown how to do that. So, Blue Force Company is the only one that I know of that actually does that. Kyberphonic does not do that. Caset does not do that. Most of the people in Saber Font, Repulse Collectibles, they don't sell Proffie blade styles with their fonts. Blue Force Company is the only one that I know of. There might be others, but that's the only one that I know of. So, Kyberphonic, the tragedy in his font demo video for that sound font, he used a blade style that a lot of people like. It was kind of white, and then it fades to pink and then to red on the blade when he ignites the saber. A lot of people don't understand that when you buy the sound font, you don't get that blade effect because a sound file has nothing to do with the blade effect. So, what you're getting are the sound files. You're not getting the blade effect. You're not getting the blade style. How do you do the tragedy sound font blade style that Kyberphonic used in his font demo video? I'm going to show you in this video. As a bonus, I'm also going to show Shock Baton, which is another one that a lot of people don't understand, but there's already a blade style out there for it. So I'm going to show you how to add all that, and I'm going to show you how to add the tragedy blade style to your lightsaber with the tragedy sound font from Kyberphonic. So what are you going to need? As always, you're going to need access to your Proffie board. You're going to need access to your SD card. You are going to need a micro USB data cable. There's a difference between a micro USB data cable and a micro USB charging cable. You need a data cable. So make sure you have that. So I am going to get my SD card out. I'm going to plug it into my computer, and I'm going to add the sound fonts to the micro SD card. All right, so here we are. This is my micro SD card of my Saber on my computer. All my sound fonts right here. So I already have the tragedy sound font on here. If you've watched my video about my Antiflex V2, then you know I have the tragedy sound font on here. So when you buy a Kyberphonic font, this applies to most sound font makers, but when you buy a Kyberphonic font, you'll see something like this when you download it. This is a Shock Baton, which I need to add to my micro SD card because it's not on there. You'll get like an extras folder sometimes, depends on the font maker. CFX, Proffie, and Verso also depends on the font maker. But we're rocking with Proffie for this video, so I will be using that folder right there for my Saber. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this Proffie folder and I'm going to paste it onto my micro SD card. Now I'm going to rename it because I don't want a long name like that on my micro SD card because I have to configure it in the config file. So I'm just going to call it Shock, and then there we go. So something I need to mention, tragedy has a tracks folder in it. You're going to copy that. You're going to go to the tracks folder of your Saber. You're going to paste it in there. I just renamed it to tragedy. Just because there's a tracks folder in the font itself does not mean it actually works when you go to configure it. You need to put it in the tracks folder on the micro SD card. It's built like a font. These are all sound fonts, and then there's one called tracks. You need to put it in there, and then you can configure it in your config file and make it work for your Saber. So now we have Shock. There's no tracks folder in the font itself, but there is when you go to the sound font that you downloaded from the website in the extras folder. So I'm just going to copy track 1. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I'm not going to listen to it right now. I'm going to paste it into the tracks folder of the micro SD card, and I'm just going to also call that shock. Doesn't exactly have to match the name of the font, but you need to know exactly what it's called so that when you go to mess with your config file, you know exactly what the sound font's name is and what the track's name is, and you can configure it. So now that I have all of that done on my micro SD card, I'm going to eject it, put it back into my Proffie, and then I'm going to plug my Proffie into my computer. Now, like I've mentioned many times, you need a micro USB data cable, not a charging cable. There is a difference. One will fry your soundboard, and the other will let you actually do stuff on your soundboard. So make sure you have a data cable. Also, make sure that your battery is removed. If you have a kill switch, turn the kill switch on, or if you have a recharge port, put a kill key in, kill power to the board before you plug it into the computer. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Proffie OS folder that's on my desktop, proffieos.eno. I'm going to open with Arduino. And then there we go. Then I'm going to go back to the Proffie OS folder, go to config. I'm going to find the config that I'm using. I'm using my Antiflex, so I'm going to use my Antiflex config. Okay, so now that I have that, I already have Tragedy configured on my Saber, but this is a different blade style. You can go check out my video about it and go look at that blade style, but I don't have shock on here, and I want to use a different Tragedy blade style. The Tragedy blade style that I'm going to be using is one by Dan Morse. There are 2 different Tragedy blade styles that he created. I'm going to use the second one, the most recent one that he created, and I'm going to be using that. I'll leave a paste bin link in the description of this video so that you can use the exact same one. If you want to mess with it, if you want to use this one as a base and then mess with it, copy and paste it into the style editor, the Proffie style editor, and then go in and mess with that. So what I'll be doing is I'll just show you both of them. So this is the first one. I'm not going to be using this one, but this is the first one. Go to a browser, just Google Proffie editor. It's the first thing that comes up. And then what you do is you're just going to paste the style, submit, and then this is the first one that he created. So that looks pretty similar to what Kyberphonic is using in his font demo. It's a little bit like a flicker and an unstable, and then you power it down. So that's essentially what most people were looking for. I'm not going to use that one though. I'm going to use the second one that I created. I'll leave both of them in that paste bin so you can use either one. And I'm going to paste it, submit. That's the one that I want to use. So this is more of like an audio flicker. But what I want to actually do is you got to make sure, because in his post about it, he said that the out was 300 and the in was 600. That means the out is the ignition and the in is the retraction of the saber, of the blade for NeoPixel. So if you scroll down, you'll find something that says like out in or TR out in. I'll try to find it real quick, as quick as I can. But it's right here. Out, in, out, TRL, in, out transition, TR wipe time in milliseconds. The in to out means the blade is inside the hilt, and now it's outside the hilt. So that's the ignition. This is 300 milliseconds. So if I change it to, 900 milliseconds, submit it, it's way slower. I don't want that though. I want it to match the blade style that he created perfectly. So 300, there we go. Now it's way faster. Now, exact same thing, out to in. So the blade is out of the hilt and it goes in. That means retraction. So that's 600 milliseconds. Remember, people, you can change it to whatever you want, but I'm going to keep it exactly as Dan Morse from the Proffie board support group set it as. So I'm going to just use this exactly as is. I already have it copied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my config file, go to Tragedy right here. Remember, there was a Tragedy track in the sound font, so I configured that as Tragedy. Then I'm going to go to the blade style. In the preset, there's a comma, quote, there's a word, quote, bracket, and then another comma. Before this first comma, I'm going to paste the new blade style in there. Now, I need to add a shock Baton sound font preset in my configuration file right now. So I'll just do it down here somewhere. I'll just copy and paste this one. What I typically do is I just copy and paste an entire preset, and then I add it to the line directly after, and then I can go in and rename everything, and it'll be fine. So what do I mean by that? See, there's array, this is the original one, and I'll just change this to shock. That's exactly the name of the sound font. And then there's a track that I used called shock. So there we go. Now, on FET263's website, there is a shock Baton blade style that he created specifically for the sound font. There it is. You can go watch his demo video for it, get style code. In this description, there's an important part. So don't just directly copy this because it won't be exactly how it is in the font demo. You need to combine this with the Polar Spark Preon and center in ignition and retraction effects to mimic the demo. So what does he mean by that? Shock Baton, go to main blade, customize enhance, Polar Spark. This isn't already going to be on there. What it'll say is just none. And it's going to say standard extension. It's going to say standard retraction. Mine just did this because I had to do this video twice now because I recorded it and the entire video was muted. So I got to redo it. But Preon effect, you're going to go to Polar Spark. That means when you hear the Preon, because there's a Preon on the font, it'll light up both sides of the blade and then it'll go before the blade turns on. Ignition effect. You go to center in. If you don't know what any of these effects mean, click on this little blue or purple question mark right there. You can read up Polar Spark, designed for use with a shock baton style. There you go. Center in ignition effect. Center in, pull from the tip towards the center. That's exactly what we want. Ignition time 300. Power up effect, don't worry about it. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but for the purpose of this video, we're just going to do exactly what FET and Kyberphonic used in their videos. Center in retraction. So you got Polar Spark Preon, center in ignition, center in retraction. Now, you can go in and add whatever you want. Otherwise, I am just going to use low blade lockup, responsive lockup. Because this has a white, silvery, blue base color for the Saber, I'm going to use something other than white for like lockup, clashes, blasters, all that stuff. So I'm going to use Prequel Trilogy compound color because I know that Prequel Trilogy, it's a bit more of a golden amber color than Sequel Trilogy. Sequel Trilogy, it's more of like a whitish blue, and then Original Trilogy, it's almost white. So I just used this color up here, Prequel Trilogy compound color for lockup effects, blast effects, clash effects. So once you got all that done, press Get Style. It copies it. You can go back to the style editor if you want to take a look at it before. I always recommend, if you're going to copy a blade style, copy it and then bring it to the style editor, paste it, submit it, submit it, and then you're going to check it. So with the style editor, you press Preon. So that is right here, Polar Spark. This is a Polar Spark Preon. It's on both sides of the blade. Polar Spark, center in ignition. Means that the blade starts from the tips of the saber, from the tips of the blades, and goes in towards the middle. Center in ignition. Clashes, as you can see, it's more of a yellowish amber color than a white. And then blasters, same thing. Lockup, there you go. You can go in and mess with all that stuff. Power off, so retraction, now it's going to go towards the middle because you have center in retraction. So Preon, Polar Spark, Preon, center in ignition, center in retraction. So that's exactly what I configured here. Polar Spark, center in, and you're good to go. You can go in and change all this other stuff if you want. You don't have to, but that's essentially what we're working with for this blade style. So now that I have that copied, I'm going to go back to my config. Shock, this is the one that I'm creating right now. Now this blade style right here, remember I just copied this entire array one and I just copied it over. Then I renamed it Shock, put the correct track, and then I'm going to just paste the new blade style, the Shock Baton blade style, over the one that's on that array blade style. Paste, there we go. Then I'm going to save my config. And we are all set. Now go back to Arduino. Make sure that you have the correct config defined in Arduino. I have antiflex_config. I'm going to verify. I'm going to verify to make sure that the blade style is working, to make sure that there's nothing wrong with my config file, make sure I didn't forget a comma, forget, a bracket, whatever. If you do it exactly how I just did it, then you should not have any errors unless there's something wrong with your Proffie board. So we are going to test it real quick. We're going to verify it. I'm pretty sure this is going to be totally fine. There we go. Uses 82% of program storage space. Remember, if you see these lines right here that says that it's like changing the start of section by however many bytes, don't worry about it. It's a known error. There's nothing wrong with your Saber. There's nothing wrong. Now that I know it's working correctly, tools, make sure you got Proffie board v2. You can change it to whatever. It's got to say serial, so you got to say serial somewhere. Mass storage web USB, totally fine. Smallest code, Proffie board on the COM port. Make sure that is on there. Otherwise, nothing will be flashed to your board. Upload. I'm going to press upload. Now it's compiling the sketch. Computer's probably going to make a noise real quick, and then it's going to start showing a progress bar if it does it correctly, which it should, because now I've done this video twice. So I use the exact same method in both videos. It's just my first time I did this video, the entire thing was muted. It was 35 minutes or 32 minutes of raw footage, and I'm now doing this video again. So as you can see here, it should say all of this stuff right here. It is downloading, has a little bit of a progress bar, percentage right there, 30%, shows you the amount of bytes. So make sure you don't touch your Proffie board. Make sure you don't touch the cable, anything like that while this is going. You do not want to mess this up in the middle of it flashing to the board, or you're going to have a really bad day. So just be very careful around this while it's uploading to the board. All right, so now it'll make a boot sound probably after you're done with the download, file downloaded successfully, all that stuff. Now, very carefully remove the Proffie board, remove it from the computer, and then I'm going to put it back into my Saber. When you're doing all this, make sure you don't have the battery in the Saber. Make sure you have kill key if you have a recharge port. Make sure you have kill switch turned on. You wanted power cut off to the board other than the tiny amount of power that the data cable is putting into the board through the computer. So now I'm going to remove the Proffie board from the computer. I'm going to unplug everything, put a battery in, put it in the Saber, and I'm going to show you that the blade styles worked perfectly fine as we configured them.
You ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Alright, let's test it out. Alright, that looks exactly like what we saw on the Proffie editor website. The camera's probably washing it out a little bit, but if you download this sound font and you add the blade style that I use from Dan Morse, which will be in a paste bin in the description of this video, by the way, you can just copy and paste it, then you should see on your Saber that it works perfectly fine and exactly as intended. Alright, so now we're going to go and see Shock Baton.
Traitor!
Alright, remember there is a preon, so you'll see that the polar spark on both sides of the blade. Alright, center and ignition, center and retraction, and the polar spark preon. Alright, perfectly fine. Alright, so like I said, those blade styles will be in a paste bin link in the description below, so please don't ask me where I got them from, because one, I showed you how to use them, how to configure them, and I put them in the description below, and links to the sound fonts that I used, which were Shock Baton and Tragedy by Kyberphonic, will be in the description below. So there shouldn't be too many questions about how I did any of this. I showed you exactly how to do it, and I also have shown you in a previous video exactly how to add sound fonts to Proffie, how to set it up, all of that stuff. So you shouldn't have any questions on that. But if you have any questions about anything else in this video, go ahead, leave them in the comment section below. And thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you.